Grammar Girl here. I'm Mignon Fogarty, your friendly guide to the English language. We talk about writing, history, rules, and other cool stuff. Today, we'll talk about the number 0 and how to write better email messages. 0 is a weird number. How can it even be a number when it represents nothing? Even its origin is tricky because the first known use of 0 as a number in mathematics was in ancient India. But the earlier Babylonians and the Mayans used placeholder values that were kind of like 0. But whether it seems like a number or not, it is. And in grammatical terms, even though it represents absolutely nothing, we treat it as plural. It's a whole lot of nothing. So if it's been a particularly bad week, you write in your diary that it's been 0 days since you cried at work, not 0 day, if you even care about grammar at that point. Now, the spelling I'm going to tell you to use for the plural noun is zeros without an E, Z-E-R-O-S. But true to form, 0 is a weird one here too, so it's also not that simple. Garner's Modern English Usage says the plural is zeros without an E, but the Oxford English Dictionary says the plural is zeros with an E, Z-E-R-O-E-S. Merriam-Webster says it can be either, so I thought it might be a difference between British and American English. But a Google Ngram search limited to British English shows zeros without the E, kicking the other form's booty. It's clearly the dominant spelling. Now, I hesitate to say the OED is wrong, but at the very least, British writers don't seem to be following its recommendation. So it looks like the best choice, no matter where you are, is to use the shorter form, Z-E-R-O-S. But when it's a verb, as in she really zeroes in on the problem, it's always the longer form with the ES at the end. At least that one is clear. Next, when do you use the word versus the numeral? Well, this also varies. In AP style, you usually spell out the word 0. Like when you're writing, it's going to be below 0 tonight, and I just know I have 0% chance of getting the lead role in the play. But the AP also says you can write the numeral 0 in technical cases, like talking about a car going from 0 to 60 and a promotional financing rate of 0%, in which case you'd use the numeral 0 and the percent symbol. The Chicago Manual of Style also wants you to write out the word 0 in non-technical writing, but says to use the numeral 0 when you're writing about percents, but to pair it with the word percent instead of the symbol. So again, it depends on what style guide you're following. Now, what about pronunciation? Sometimes people think it's wrong to pronounce 0 as O, but it's actually okay in certain contexts. For example, it's fine, even normal, to say O when you're reading a series of numbers, such as a zip code, 90210, a room number, room 404, or a phone number, 555-206-1234. Of course, we can't forget agent designations. James Bond, Agent 007. On the other hand, you pronounce it 0 when you're talking about math or science. For example, you'd say 5 minus 0 equals 5, or that the temperature is below 0. We also have some interesting 0 phrases. 0 dark 30, for example, is military slang for super early in the morning or late at night. If you have to get up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., that is 0 dark 30. The OED actually has simply dark 30 as the original form in 1938. And it looks like 0 dark 30 emerged later in 1958. To zero in on something also started as a military term during the World War II era. It first meant to set the sight of your gun or missile on a target. This was apparently a big time for our friend Zero, because that era also gave us the phrase zero-sum game, which describes a game where there's a set amount of something you can win, like points or money. So if one person gets more, the other person gets less. Poker is a zero-sum game, for example, if there's no house taking a cut. The money or chips just change hands among the players. Serving a pie is also a zero-sum game because there's only so much pie. If I take more, you get less. And World War II also gave us the phrase ground zero. I'm starting to think I should have held on to this topic for Veterans Day. But ground zero emerged in 1946 to describe the site of a nuclear explosion. It wasn't until the 1990s that the use broadened to mean the site of any devastation, disaster, or violent attack. And this always surprises me, even though ground zero refers to a specific place when you use it to describe the site of the September 11th attacks in New York. The AP style book says to keep ground zero lowercase in this use. It seems like a proper noun to me, but people just haven't taken to capitalizing it. And although you'll sometimes hear people say they're going back to ground zero when they have to start something from scratch, that's generally considered to be an error. Garner says to stick with going back to square one. And I'll end this segment with a personal pet peeve: xeriscaping. I'm a big fan of xeriscaping, spelled Xeriscaping. It comes from a combination of the word xeric, which means having scant moisture, and the word scape, which in this case refers to a type of land. So xeriscaping is creating a beautiful yard with plants that don't need a lot of water. According to the OED, the word was coined by the Denver Water Department in 1981. The xeric root comes from the Greek prefix xer, xer, which means dry. And there aren't many English words that use that xer prefix. Xeroderma is dry skin. Xerography is a type of dry printing. Xerophagy is eating dry food. And besides xeriscape, there are just a few others. But a lot of people seem to call it xeroscaping, and that kind of bugs me. People are always asking about my pet peeves, and I need to remember to include this one. Xeriscape came first, but xeroscape is actually a word that landscapers seem to widely use now, even though it hasn't made it into dictionaries yet. Xeroscaping is more extreme than xeriscaping. It uses a lot of rocks and gravel, or even just dirt, and plants that need very little water, like juniper, cactus, and yucca. A xeroscaped yard can be nice too, and requires almost no maintenance, but it is not the same thing as a yard that is xeriscaped. If you've ever received an email that irritated you because of its overly familiar or casual tone, you are not alone. Particularly in contexts involving professional or social distance, the language someone uses in an email can determine how and whether the recipient responds. The key is to understanding how your linguistic style plays a role in how you craft your email messages, and to realize that we don't all have the same style, which can be a potential problem when you're emailing someone you don't know very well. Unlike formal writing, which is highly codified and taught in schools, email is a newer form of communication that's more of a hybrid between speech and writing. As a result, the quote-unquote rules are more fluid and more sensitive to the social context and how we know each other compared to other written contexts. What this means is that the formality level and politeness we adopt will vary based on the norms and expectations brought in from social reference groups, as well as what your goals are for a specific email and with a specific recipient. For instance, you might have been introduced to someone at a social mixer during a business event. To send a follow-up email after the meeting, you have to decide whether you should go with workplace norms, which tend toward formality, or if you should go with a more informal tone, since you met the person in a pseudo-social context. In other words, is it Mr. Smith, so nice to have met you, or John, how's it going? Age differences can also influence what someone thinks would be most appropriate in such a context, potentially leading to a culture clash when there's a mismatch between a sender and a receiver's expectations. Workplace culture has actually been trending more informal for the past several decades. something not only apparent in the increasing prevalence of business casual dress, but also in the shift toward less hierarchical conversation styles. This means that younger speakers often prioritize establishing solidarity and equality with their linguistic choices. Hey, John! While older speakers might show respect through titles and formal greetings. Dear Sir. Differences in the use of social media and technology can also drive a wedge if, for instance, someone's used to viewing a resume as an attachment versus being directed to Google Docs or LinkedIn to see the information. Well, a lot has been made of younger generations being less polite than older generations. It's more likely that what's changed is what we view as polite behavior rather than the loss of politeness more generally. Fortunately for us, linguists have done a lot of research on politeness. The most well known theory of politeness was first articulated by Penelope Brown and Stephen Levinson in 1987 and suggested that people are driven by two different pressures when it comes to formulating polite exchanges. The first pressure is that we generally want to be liked and admired, something linguists refer to as positive face. To address each other's positive face, we formulate what to say in ways that are meant to make other people feel good and highlight commonality. This would include things like giving compliments, using first names, using inclusive language, and other shows of solidarity and friendship. The second pressure we feel is toward recognizing what's been termed negative face. Paying attention to another's negative face recognizes the fact that we also have a desire to be respected and not be imposed upon. Courteous language, showing deference, and awareness of another's time through apologies or polite forms like hedging are typical ways people address this pressure. Thus, the more casual language style that's popular among Gen Z is, at least in part, indicative of the increased attention to solidarity and friendship involved in forms of positive politeness. Older speakers, on the other hand, may feel that attention to negative face, in other words, not causing offense and showing respect, are a greater priority in business settings. Likewise, although digital natives who've used technology their whole lives may not see directing someone to links for information instead of directly attaching the info as burdensome, it has the potential to feel like an imposition to people who prefer to be able to just get an attachment in the body of an email. These differences may explain why some emails may come across as disrespectful or lacking etiquette, especially in intergenerational situations. But there's an easy solution: err on the side of caution. Research has suggested that polite speech is related to social power, with polite speech forms being more typical of those with less rank. So, people with higher status in an interaction may have a greater expectation for politeness markers from people seeking their help or who are in subordinate roles. So, when emailing someone you don't know well, especially in the workplace, use a more formal greeting, such as Ms. X, instead of a first name. That's the safest bet, at least at first. Also, although it's fine to include links, in other words, to a resume or a profile on LinkedIn, you can also offer to send a digital copy if the recipient would prefer it. Once the initial email is received and responded to, shifting to a less formal style is likely to be better received. Whether you lean formal or casual, the strength of new hybrid forms of communication like texting and emailing is exactly that they are more fluid and conversational. Being aware of how you might come across to people with a different linguistic style helps ensure your message will be a boon and not a bust. That segment was written by Valerie Friedland, a professor of linguistics at the University of Nevada in Reno, and the author of Like Literally Dude, Arguing for the Good in Bad English. It originally appeared on Psychology Today, and you can find her at valeriefriedland.com. Finally, I have a Familect story.
Hi, this is Annette calling from Utah with a Familect that comes from the pandemic era. When my husband was first working remotely, every so often he would come out of a Zoom meeting very frustrated about people who were frustrating him and not listening or whatever the case may be. And he said, "Oh, do you remember that point in Gilmore Girls where Michelle says something about people are particularly stupid today? I can't talk to any more of them." And then I said, "Oh, yes, 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 I remember that exactly." And he said, "We need to have an acronyms just to make that simple." So we made an acronym. People are particularly stupid today. And now one of us can just walk in the room and say, "PAPST," and then walk right back out again. And that's all we need to know, because that's when someone has frustrated us. And it all goes back to Gilmore Girls and Zoom meetings in the pandemic.
Thanks, Annette. That's a great story, and I can definitely see how it'd be useful to have shorthand for that feeling. If you want to share your Familect, a word or phrase your family and only your family uses, call the voicemail line at 833-214-GIRL. Call from a nice quiet place, and be sure to tell me the story behind your Familect, because that's always the best part. Finally, if you're an educator, have you checked out my free LinkedIn learning courses at your university library? Or if you're not an educator, have you told a friend who is? I have short videos with transcripts about every major topic you'd want to teach your students: commas, hyphens, dashes, commonly confused words, subject-verb agreement. It goes on and on. And did I mention they're often free through your library? So, as you're thinking about your fall lesson plans, check out my courses and slot in some videos to make your teaching job easier. I'll put a link in the show notes, or you can go to my profile on LinkedIn. Grammar Girl is a quick and dirty tips podcast. Thanks to Ad Operations Specialist Morgan Christensen, Digital Operations Specialist Holly Hutchings, Director of Podcasts Brandon Getchis, Marketing Associate Davina Tomlin, and Audio Engineer Nathan Semes, who's planning a kayaking camping trip down the Allegheny River. And I'm Mignon Fogarty, better known as Grammar Girl. Remember to look for Grammar Girl Conversations in your feed. This Thursday, I have an interview with Karen Yin, author of The Conscious Style Guide. That's all. Thanks for listening.